Welcome, everybody, to Patriots Law Group Live, Legal Strategies for Military Divorce. We are so glad that you are joining us today. We have a new topic that we bring to you during every live stream where we are here every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And this week's topic, it's a pretty sensitive subject, but such a critically important one if you are navigating a military divorce. And today's subject, we're going to be talking about 5 critical ways that domestic violence can impact your military divorce. So if you are an active service person, you are a veteran, or you are a military spouse, and you are in a sensitive situation right now where you are navigating a military divorce, you are in the right place. We are here with our military divorce law specialists, Mike Lyons and Pat Hughes. Welcome to both of you. You are going to be diving into this subject and taking the reins, and I want to say welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Mike.
Thank you, Maureen.
Hi, Pat. How are you?
Hey, Maureen, I'm well. Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you so much. You are the stars of the show. So if we didn't have you, we would not be here, because without the two of you, we would not be able to bring these legal insights, these tips, and some opportunities for people to make informed decisions on what's happening out there. And that's what this show is all about, is to provide some real resources and guidance. And so who would like to dive in on this first topic here?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick introduction, because unfortunately, you wish it wouldn't be the case, but divorce is often commonly triggered by a domestic violence type scenario that has led to that path being taken. And so with the added component of the military service involving one of those two people, there are a lot of nuanced things that can come up on the impacts. And there's also the situation sometimes, unfortunately, where someone might make an allegation that isn't backed in truth or well supported, and they think that they're gaining an advantage by making that type of an allegation of domestic violence, not really fully contemplating the impacts that type of allegation could have, that are long-reaching and could end up really blowing back on that person in some ways, because of the denial of entitlements that someone might get because their career is impacted, or things like that, all based on a domestic violence allegation. So we're going to work through 5 critical ways that we think domestic violence can impact a person's military divorce. And I think, Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. Thanks for that introduction. And, the first one right out of the gate, you think about, most service members have a requirement to be able to arm, right, to carry a firearm. And one of the first things that happens whenever a civilian, particularly when a civilian court orders a protective order based on an allegation of domestic violence, and that's really issued at the very early stages, just based on, is there any way that what has been said by the alleged victim could be true? So a very, very low standard, a reasonable basis standard. The standard goes up from there, but at that moment, an order is issued and the right to have a firearm is taken away, so long as that order is in place. Even when there isn't a civilian protective order, there's a natural inclination of commanders and others to say, well, let's just keep away a firearm until this is fully resolved, because we know how quickly a domestic violence situation, when there is actual violence and fighting going on in a home, can occur. So how does that affect your divorce? Well, first, it certainly could change the trajectory of somebody's career if they can't arm. Maybe they're going on deployment or a TDY, or they have a special assignment and they need to have that firearm at all times. Well, the military isn't going to say, for the next 10 days when you're not able to have your firearm, still come on in and hold that position. They're going to yank you out and put somebody else in, because they need assurance that these roles are filled both now and if that outcome is a bad one for the service member in the future. So there's not a lot of wait to see what happens in the military. So how can that be resolved or mitigated in a military divorce is, speaking with the other side or their counsel. And maybe instead of this protective order, and we've actually got involved mid-case and say, hey, we got an idea. Let's dismiss this protective order proceeding and give you all of the same relief in a divorce proceeding. So if the protective order is designed to get the alleged abuser out of the house, we say to the divorce court, give exclusive use and possession to the alleged victim. If it is to prevent, harassment or abuse, then we say to the divorce court, pass an order that isn't a domestic violence order, but that says do not abuse or threaten to abuse or contact. And what that does is that puts in place, some level of protection without triggering all of these automatic, under federal law and otherwise state laws, all these automatic restrictions on firearms and other things as well. So that's one way domestic violence impacts a military divorce, as well as a solution to maybe mitigate it, that you and your counsel can think through if it's right in your case.
Divorce is already complex enough. And this is one of those things when we talk about military divorce, right there, how it impacts somebody's career, because this is just one of those like sticky nuances in a military divorce that, we talk about the complexity of this and how important it is, because we don't think about a military service person has to use a firearm right then and there. And it can be their career is automatically impacted if it has to be taken away. So then what do you do? Right. That's great. Okay. So number 2.
But it gets worse.
It gets worse. Okay.
Because chances of you needing to use your firearm on that particular day, or as it just happens, are much less than you needing to use your security clearance. And I mean, the myriad of people now in the cyber world or space, like all these people have to go into a skiff every day, and they're using their security clearance every day. And in the moment an event of domestic violence comes about, that can lead to the immediate suspension of someone's security clearance during the pendency of any investigation or what have you. And so there's these adjudicative guidelines that identify when a security concern is raised, and obviously criminal conduct happens to be one of them, and domestic violence fits within that mold. That could lead to someone, a commander, a supervisor, saying, we got to pull your security clearance for now because you're under the investigation, and it raises a security concern. And the path becomes a long one when that happens, if someone's security clearance is suspended, because it then flows over to the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, another agency, not the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, that has to take a look at and determine, based on the evidence that is before them, the charges and anything else that they acquire, if the security concern mandates revocation of someone's security clearance. And again, this path, the moment it's suspended, your job, you can't access a skiff. Your job becomes pushing paper and pouring coffee. And then, that could last for months, if not longer, potentially, if things don't go the right way. And you're also put into a position of, do I provide information now through the security clearance process when I have a criminal allegation lodged against me? Because as a defense counsel, I don't really do criminal work much anymore, at least for not state criminal matters, but I'll do military criminal matters at times. there may not be the right, it might not be the right time to come forward with your explanation about what happened through the security clearance process, when that gets triggered more often than not before any criminal process takes any significant steps. And so now you're left with, I can't provide you information because my criminal lawyer is telling me it's not a good time to do that because it could jeopardize my criminal matter. And you know, candidly, I would think most people would probably want to stay out of jail versus, you know, whether or not you hold a security clearance. And so that gets prioritized. And so it's a really big impact the moment somebody comes forward. And you know, the agencies, they're now in a continuous review process for security clearances. So whether you identify that an allegation has been made against you, you first off, if you're arrested or any of the requirements under what's called the Security Executive Agent Directive 3, it's basically a document that says when you have an affirmative duty to come forward and disclose information because you hold a security clearance, whether you have an affirmative duty or not, the agencies are looking and continuously reviewing. And if anything pops in the system to say that someone has a protective order against them, they're likely to find it. And so it just leads to so many potential impacts when someone holds a security clearance based on a domestic violence allegation, and the career impacts of that person could end up having the second or third order effect of impacting the person who made the allegations too. So there's just a lot going on to consider.
Yeah. And, you know, that's one of the things that ties back to, once that cat's out of the bag, it's pretty hard, or horses out of the barn, whichever it is, it's pretty hard to get it all back and within the control of the parties. So as I was mentioning with the firearm, you know, we can kind of get it all resolved before the final protective order hearing in a lot of cases. This isn't that way. And so we spend a lot of time with clients who have an allegation that they wish to make, talking about what is it that you hope to have as the result. And there are some cases when it's okay, if that's the result you want, then we need to sort of, the consequences will be the consequences, and they'll be shared across both spouses. But very often we'll find that, you know, I want myself and my children to be protected, and I don't want to sacrifice, you know, my spouse's career, or at least I don't want to sacrifice financial, you know, resources for my kids. And so I think the big takeaway here is, you know, when you have a domestic violence situation, to engage with competent counsel about all the alternative ways to accomplish the end that's desired, rather than just the night something happens and you're at or we hear sometimes too, people will go out of state to stay with their family members, and then 3 days later come back and file for a protective order. You know, that one's maybe spend those 3 days talking with somebody, because maybe there's something better to file or some better approach than mutually assured destruction. Let me roll right into, so we can keep on time here. You know, the third, what we'll mention is the third is canceled PCSs and extended enlistments. These are things that people really, really don't think about.
PCS being a change of station, a permanent change of station, for those that might not be aware.
Yeah, that's right.
I wasn't aware. I was going to ask. We got some acronyms going on out there for those of us who don't know. Thank you, Pat. You probably saw it on my face. Like
the military jargon, is a bad thing. And SCIF, Pat, do you want to say what SCIF is, since we're trading fire here?
I was gonna, but then I couldn't remember what it stood for. It's like, I don't know.
Compartmentalized Information Facility.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right, so back to, you know, one of the other things is, one of these things, you know, domestic violence is treated seriously. In fact, there's been some revisions to the Uniform Code of Military Justice that puts them in a category different than just assault and battery against a non-cohabitant or spouse or child. And And once one of these allegations is raised, an investigation is triggered. And let's say the whole family's from out in Oregon, and you're coming up on the last 2 or 3 months of whatever, and maybe everybody's thinking we're going to get out of the service, we're going to go our separate ways, or maybe they think that's the pressure relief that's going to make things get a little bit better. And this allegation happens. Really, what happens very frequently is the military is going to say, time out, we're going to extend your enlistment until we figure this out. Because if we let you go, one, you may get an honorable and you may not have deserved it. Two, you may have committed a crime and you wouldn't have had any punishment. And so, we've seen in more very serious cases, but people stay on station 9, 10, 12 or more months and stay in the military all of these months when they thought they were getting out. And how that may affect a service member's spouse is they may have plans, jobs lined up, and all of their household goods are here, but everything's placed on pause because it doesn't move until the service member is ordered or released to move. So this is something we like to raise, and here we'd like to sort of get on people's radars, because this feels like a fourth or fifth order effect, but one that can really cause people to say, darn, I wish I had thought through when I file it. I mean, heck, maybe it's you get to Oregon as 2 months later and you file it and the person's out of the service and the benefits are protected, and who knows? But that's number three, the third critical way that it can affect your military divorce.
Are there any more? I mean, we knew this topic was going to be sensitive, but you're talking about very multi-layered here. I mean, there are, and I'm almost wondering, how does a lawyer, you've got to be really good to put all these pieces together. It's almost like once you file this, there doesn't seem to be a lot of ways out. Once you said that horse is out of the gate, like it's very hard to put this back. So if it's an emotional situation, you go and file this, I think it's really hard to turn around and put this back together again. That's kind of my feeling that I'm getting. Once this is done, this is really serious.
It is serious.
It is.
Pat deals with a lot of contractors. I think you find the hardest situations for security clearances, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, Mike, but don't get us wrong either, though. Like, if there's domestic violence occurring, these tools exist, and they're there to help protect against certain circumstances. But people need to go into it eyes wide open on the impacts, and if it's like a close call or something, whether it's worth pursuing in a certain way, if it's maybe not necessarily domestic violence, or it leads to certain outcomes that you're not wanting, there may be other options available to contemplate before taking that path, right? Because again, another impact is, as number 4, what could end up leading to military discipline under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It might not just be a state matter. It might be a matter involving your employer that could lead to, depending on the severity, a court-martial as the most severe, where you're taken to a criminal trial like you would be in a state court. There's also options that commanders have to discipline you through non-judicial punishment, also known as Article 15s or captain's masks, depending on your service. It's pursuant to Article 15 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It also has the impact of a permanent stain in your background check. There's criminal indexing that can occur. And so anytime that your subsequent career might involve pursuing a security clearance or something to that effect, this stain will always be there, in that you had received some domestic violence incident or discipline, if you're investigated through CID, the Criminal Investigative Division for the Army, OSI, Office of Special Investigations for the Air Force, NCIS, National Criminal or Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, right? Any of those agencies, if they investigate an allegation All it takes is the allegation. If there's credible information, those are the key terms, at the time that they are investigating you, the credible information to believe that you may have committed the offense, you now have that permanent stain in your background, even if things eventually resolve in your favor. So lost rank, lost pay, lost authority if you're a commander, you're pulled from your supervisory positions. This, will then lead to the denial of any future promotion if you have that type of impact in your career, because as much as we would hope that it's not the case, it more often than not, for officers especially, does become one mistake service. We used to, when we were in the Air Force, we used to call it a one mistake Air Force. A fair bit for people that I was representing. I would try to make that as part of my argument to say this shouldn't be a one mistake Air Force, so give the person a reprieve. But all of these potential impacts within the military service member's career can happen because of domestic violence allegations.
Yeah.
So, Pat, just for clarification, are you saying that even if it's been proven to be wrong, just the allegation can have that impact? So they're considered guilty anyway, and they can lose all of that? That seems completely unfair.
Well, they might not lose all of it. I mean, but in particular, the allegation, if leading to a criminal indexing, because all it takes is credible information, even if it's eventually unsubstantiated or an acquittal, if it goes to trial or anything like that, it's still going to be a permanent stain in that person's record. I mean, I've had so many clients where we were representing a whole host of soldiers in Europe, not related to domestic violence, but because they were accused of housing allowance fraud, and we got a great outcome for them. Eventually, it took many years, and we're still actually working through that case since 2018. But those people who were alleged to have committed BAH fraud, housing allowance fraud, were criminally indexed, titled, and it's in their record. I mean, unless you are able to go through the process of having it removed, which is very lengthy and quite often unsuccessful, because again, if at the time that the indexing decision was made, credible information existed, even if it's subsequently decided that that the allegation's unsubstantiated, that may not allow the person to have the stain on his record removed, or her record. So, yeah, it's not fair. In some ways, I think many people would say that, but it is how the process exists.
And the biggest dilemma, and it's funny, it's sort of a mutual dilemma. The allegation of domestic violence is generally in a private setting against two parties who are already upset with one another. So you have, from a trial perspective, everybody has a motive to say something, right? Just based on their being upset. And it's a he said, she said case. There might be a bruise on one party or other, and that sort of helps that there was physical interaction, but it doesn't necessarily give the full context, and the courts and deciders of fact are left with just trying to weigh credibility. And so sometimes that means actual victims don't carry their burden, and sometimes that means alleged abusers sort of fall into a category of, well, I don't know, I believe this version more than your version. So that's kind of how we see that come up. There's also and to this point, like, so Pat's talking about court-martial criminal conduct sort of stuff. But at a lower level, the Air Force and the services say, well, we also have a right as, quote, an employer to determine who's in our branch. So when you do get to that end of your enlistment, and maybe this is an issue where the investigation is still going on, they can say, on balance, we don't feel comfortable any longer. There was this allegation or substantiated or whatever, and just simply say you're no longer allowed to re-enlist. And then you're out of the service for that reason. There can also be, and we've seen this, and I think these are really the hardest cases. we've seen in certain cases where an allegation is made against, the service member in this case, 4 or 5 years ago, this act of abuse occurred. and and even though there's not enough, I mean, it's he said, she said, and you start thinking, well, why didn't you say, or here's a bunch of pictures with the happy family that time and subsequent, near in time and subsequent time. And so the person trying to make this decision says, I just can't get there. But what very frequently happens in the military is it gets documented, because they don't want to have, if something real came up second, and everybody say, what happened with the first situation? And so there's at least a piece of paper. And that piece of paper is frequently an LOR if it's an officer. Well, in this case and others, that LOR triggers what's called an officer grade determination. How much retirement pay is based on sort of what your rank is when you retired, or your highest pay, but this makes an adjustment to that. And that service member was retired as a major rather than a lieutenant colonel, even though none of the discipline was any greater than this piece of paper. It said, this allegation was made, don't have inappropriate, when you're in a fight, you should leave that, whatever. Something simple as that, right? When you and your spouse are arguing, you should just leave the situation in the future. But it's an LOR. And so that service member has a great reduction, and the former spouse's share is correspondingly reduced, because it's like going from a large pizza to a medium pizza. You got half the medium, you'd rather have half the large. And so those are some ways, and this is an interesting topic because we're on all sides of these cases all the time, representing the spouses, representing the service members. There's no right answer. And really, I kind of like to say we're like whitewater rafting guys in these situations. We don't know exactly how the current's going to push one way or how the facts are going to be. We have a general idea how to navigate through it, but it's no clear path. But we would like anybody that hears this podcast to think through and to work with their counsel to think through, where are we trying to get to, and what are the second, third, and fourth order effects of what we're trying to do. Because you generally can get to where you want to go without clumsily knocking in or stepping on all these landmines.
I think that's excellent advice. Excellent advice, because this is such an incredibly sensitive subject with a lot of ramifications, numerous directions that you're talking about. Really, really good. Really good.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, there's actually some things that many people might not be aware of related to the benefits that can still be maintained if you are the victim of domestic violence, because the military in recent years has really been looking at this hard and finding ways that would help victims of domestic violence. And so there are ways to maintain a pension for a victim, even if it's lost for the service member, if a conviction of a domestic violence type incident occurred. And so these are things that we can help assist our clients with knowing and pursuing, that many people that aren't part of the military community and know about this would be able to even think about pursuing on their own.
Yeah, and on that point, I've actually once. So what it is the spouse or the dependents, and to include stepchildren, have to be the alleged victim in the offense that led to the discharge, and it has to be one of the listed offenses. So there's been times in cases where we've been working with the people on base to say it should be this charge if the facts line up, because we want to make sure that this is still available for the victim to receive. And even if the service member is not retirement eligible, which he must be for what Pat just described at the time of the offense, if there's something called transition assistance that can be given to victims of domestic violence if the service member is discharged, even if it's before retirement eligibility. So good point, Pat. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, I think that's great information. And I don't think normal outside counsel would necessarily know about this. And that's why when we talk about military divorce specialists like yourselves, this is where you get into the nitty gritty and you know the details. That's the difference that Patriots Law Group brings. And that's why we're doing these type of resource podcasts for people to understand the differences about that. Well, gentlemen, I think you really brought it on today. Again, every single time we get together, I think it gets better and better. And I don't think today was any different. So I want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great job. Now, I know, Mike, we always like to inform our audience and especially people who are watching the replay. You want to let people know about, sharing this information and also seeking other, legal counsel if they do have them. You want to let people know a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the biggest takeaway, there's a lot of information on the internet. This is some more information on the internet. It's all or the best outcome for a client in a case is to have individualized analysis of the facts of a particular case against the law as it is at that time. So I would highly recommend anybody that has a service connection, and they can be the service member, the spouse, or other parties who are dependents, have a right to free legal services on the base. I would suggest speaking with them. There's counsel, not only us, but other counsel of military backgrounds, also very good resources to reach out to, but even civilian counsel. Direct them to these resources so they can be used as a guide or as data points. But please do not rely on any one particular thing we said as being the precise action that should be taken in your case. We simply don't know what the facts of that case would be and couldn't say if we'd have different advice. So this isn't advice. This is sort of just information to use, is what I'd like to caution our listeners to.
It's great. This is just to help you make informed decisions and just more education for you to collect with some amazing insights from incredible lawyers out there. And if you'd like to learn more about Patriots Law Group, you can go to patriotslawgroup.com and learn more, not just about their specialty in military divorce, but they have expertise across all different military specialties. So please go ahead and check out the website and also an entire library of resources specifically in military divorce. We've been doing this live stream, these resource shows for a while now. So if you've missed some episodes, there is an entire library available for you. We will be back in a couple weeks for another amazing topic. So we would like for you to return and we will see you in a couple weeks for a great new topic. So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have any questions, go on the website. We have people ready to answer your questions. And thanks again for being here. And Mike and Pat, thanks again for bringing it on with great advice.
Thank you, Maureen. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
All righty. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye.